Recently, me and a friend of mine were visiting an electronics recycling center, and among other things, there we found a neat little piece of box software called Aldus Super 3D. Aldus is a company best known for their publishing software such as PageMaker and Freehand. However, in 1990 they managed to acquire San Diego-based Silicon Beach Software, which also owned Super 3D, a full CAD package that would later be released under the Aldus name. Now what we have here is the first release with the Aldus name, 1990's Super 3D 2.5. Aldus helped develop the TIFF and OPI industry standard formats. However, in 1994 they were acquired by Adobe for $446 million. At this time, PageMaker was losing market share swiftly, and so Adobe eventually discontinued it in favor of its own InDesign. While Super 3D would be left behind, it did help pave the way for accessible design software on personal computers like the Macintosh. It is not a professional CAD package in the traditional sense, instead being more geared toward illustrators and designers, and also non-professional users. Featuring a relatively straightforward user interface, it helped pave the way for tools like Adobe's later Dimension. So let's boot up System 6 on our Macintosh Plus and explore this lovely piece of the early 90s. So let's insert the Disk 1 floppy and proceed to open the software. Alright, here we are greeted with our main document in the center. On the left it is accompanied by the sketch tool palette and the zoom tools, and on the bottom by the color palette represented here in grayscale. Let's begin a sketch with a simple circle. Alright, and then we will use the revolve tool, one of the three available ones among extrude and sweep. This will predictably, in the traditional sense, revolve our sketch about the center axis, and in this case create a torus, more commonly known as a donut. We can adjust our view and our torus will be redrawn accordingly. We can also choose to display the torus as a solid instead of the default wireframe. I'll go with the faster option for rendering as it is still quite slow. We can even add shading to our object. In the shading menu there are several options. We can turn on our light source, move it around the object with this little thing, we can choose a more diffuse lighting mode, choose to utilize quote-unquote specular highlights, and adjust the light's intensity. Our torus will now be redrawn in its full shaded glory. We can also call back faces, which will allow for the software to perform much better, as seen here. After the creation of an object, it can now be moved around the workspace. But I think I'll keep it in the center for now. With the sketch tools, we can even add text. This will be represented as sort of a floating point in 3D space, but the text will display forward to us. As you can see here, we can even move it around. To fully admire what we have created, we can choose to hide the grid. Beautiful. Let's position our donut in a bit of a more appealing position. We can now go ahead and export it into a variety of formats. Most of these are unfortunately unsupported by modern software except for EPS, which we can later open in Adobe Illustrator. This is going to be an image which we will view later. I will now go ahead and play around with some of the other tools. I'll extrude a square, and also a little car. Alright, we can position these however we want. Overall, I'm just going to make a nice little composition here that I'll export to an image, which we'll review in a bit. Just doing the lighting setup. And even adding a background color. Brilliant. Let's take a look at what we have created. I unfortunately could not get any of the files to export except for this more basic version of a different car I did the other day. However, as you can see, now looking at it without dithering, we can tell that the shading is actually done surprisingly competently. This software is pretty interesting for 1990, especially considering that it ran on a consumer computer. Alright, hopefully you enjoyed that brief showcase of Aldus Super 3D 2.5. If you want more content like this in the future, please consider liking and subscribing, and I am out.